thank you very much for being so consistent and showing up, yes, every Sunday morning. I see you want to say something. I don't
No,
want to. Yeah,
four more to go, and we've hit 200.
right. Yes, we'll be, yes, hitting 200 in about 4 weeks. This
Yes.
year, actually, before the year is over. So I don't want to keep people waiting, and I'll give you the screen, or half of it at least, so that you can let us know what we're going to hear from about from you today.
Thank you very much, Maya. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Japanese Politics One-on-One. Like Maya said, this is the 196th consecutive Sunday we have spent together. Maya, that's fantastic.
It
The
is,
yen
yeah.
closed. The yen closed out at 152.69 to the dollar on Friday. It closed out last week at 152.95, so it's strengthened just a tiny bit, but it's at a very volatile time. As you know, Donald Trump became president of the United States, president-elect of the United States. He takes office in mid-January. It has caused a lot of turmoil and a lot of guessing and a lot of hand-wringing, but it is what's going to happen. 4 more years of Donald Trump as the president of the United States. There's a lot to look forward to. Not everybody is happy with that result. People are not quite sure what to do. The Prime Minister of Japan, Mr. Ishiba, spent 5 minutes talking with him on Thursday. The election was on Tuesday. I guess he had to wait in line, and on Thursday they had a 5-minute phone call that was reported to be very cordial, as you would have expected. Let me see. The Japanese government the parliament elects a new prime minister tomorrow. We'll talk a little bit about that. Komeito selects their new president yesterday. They selected a new president yesterday because the former president, who had been in office for maybe 5 weeks, lost his election in the last election cycle of the lower house that we just are emerging from. And the Constitutional Democratic Party now holds the most powerful seat within the lower house, the Budget Committee chairmanship. This hasn't happened for 34 years or so that the opposition has held such a key position in the government. So there's a lot to talk about. I'd like to get into the beef of it a little bit more. Give you a bit of a time to talk about our sponsors, and then maybe at the halfway mark, maybe after a half an hour, open it up to Q&A, where the real meat and bones of this briefing actually occurs. So Maya, back to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Timothy. Yes, just before we dive into the details here, I want to say a big thank you to our sponsors. The first one of them is Kanchu, Kanagawa Chuo Jutaku, Kanchu. You can find them online at kanachu.com. So before we continue, let me say that Kanchu offers bilingual services in Japanese and in English to individuals who want to buy and sell real estate in Tokyo and Yokohama. They also do property management and investment property. To work with them, please contact James Howell at james@kanachu.com or connect with James on LinkedIn. You're not going to regret that. They'll customize their services to your needs, and you will really have a good time. Not just working with them, but also communicating and talking about your future projects with them. So thank you, Timothy. Let's go back and see what more we can learn from you today.
Great. Thank you very much. So as I was saying, the Japanese parliament selects the prime minister tomorrow. This is a big deal, very complicated. As we just came through the election for the president of the prime minister, there was 2 rounds. There were 9 candidates, you'll remember. In the first round, we basically figured out who's in the first position and the second position. And in the second round, the person in the first position and the second position also went for a vote. And it turned out to be Mr. Ishiba against Ms. Takaichi. And Mr. Ishiba won and became prime minister very briefly and closed down the house for an election for the entire lower house. That election was last week. The LDP did pretty miserably. They lost more than 12. They lost about 65 seats, which is about 12 less than what they need to have at least a majority position. So as a consequence of that, there are a couple of things that are happening. Number one, the Diet needs to come together, the upper house and the lower house. They're going to do that tomorrow, and they're going to vote on who is going to be the prime minister. And similarly, there's likely to be two rounds. The first round is the LDP will vote for their member, the Constitutional Democratic Party will vote for their member, the Democratic Party for the People will vote for their member, Mr. Tamaki, and it will be all over the board, and there will be no clear winner. So they will have round number two, and in round number two, clearly it's going to be Mr. Ishiba versus Mr. Noda, who is the leader of the Constitutional Democratic Party. That is the thinking as it is right now. There are other combinations that could come through. So, for example, and we're not going to know, all of these discussions are secret at this point, but it is possible that the Constitutional Democratic Party forms a union with the Democratic Party for the People, even in to the extent of offering Mr. Tamaki being the prime minister in order for the opposition party to completely kick out the LDP. That is a possibility. It is mathematically possible. I'm not sure if there's enough push there. That would mean that all of the opposition parties need to come together. That means the communists, the Shinseito, all of these parties, Ishin-no-kai. It is possible, but it's unlikely. Mr. Baba, a good and very dear friend of mine for many, many years, is the leader of the Ishin-no-kai. And he just announced on Thursday that he would not be seeking the party leadership when they go to a convention on December 1st. So today is what, the 10th? So in 20 days, they will have their party convention. And he has said kind of to take responsibility for the fact that Ishin-no-kai did not do better than it did. It lost seats, in fact. He's going to take responsibility for that and not run for election as the Ishin-no-kai leader. He and the Secretary General who were managing the election campaign are both resigning from their positions. There's a lot of resignations. There's a lot of movement going on there. And this will become a little bit clearer. One of the things that became very clear was that the Constitutional Democratic Party insisted on and received as a consolation the chairmanship of the very powerful budget committee in the lower house. So this the opposition has not held this position. This is the most powerful party committee position within the lower house, and a lot is decided there. The chairman sets the agenda, and the members are distributed according to the party strength. So even the LDP does not have a majority position inside the budget committee. So it gives the chairman a lot of opportunity to call people for questioning, for testimony to be brought up, for evidence to be presented, and to slap sanctions on people that aren't doing the right thing or haven't been forthcoming with their information. So it's a very, very big deal. And it indicates that moving policy forward under the Ishiba administration as it is currently being constructed is going to be very difficult. There's going to be a lot of fights. There's going to be a lot of contention. Already we can see that Mr. Tamaki is in negotiating with the LDP. He's actually negotiating with the LDP. He's negotiating with the Constitutional Democratic Party as well. They met last week. The two leaders met, Mr. Noda and Mr. Tamaki, met last Monday to decide basically what the Constitutional Democratic Party is willing to concede to Mr. Tamaki and his party in order for them to form a union. And he's got some pretty stiff demands. Similarly, he's having the negotiations with the LDP. Those demands are a little bit tougher, but the LDP needs Mr. Tamaki a lot more than the Constitutional Democratic Party, because the LDP is already presumptively in that position of power. They already presumptively have the prime minister's position. They have the cabinet already established. So there's a little bit more that the LDP can negotiate to bring Mr. Tamaki together so that the LDP, Komeito, and the Democratic Party for the People, at least they eclipse the 51% so that they can move policies, they can move the budget machinery, they can move the policy machinery forward. Mr. Tamaki, according to news reports that were developed this last week, basically said, I'm not really interested in a coalition like being a Komeito-like partner to you, but we'll be friends. And on those issues that we have a common interest in, I will agree to vote with you, which isn't a hard decision. It's not much of a concession. But on those positions we feel really strongly on, for example, reducing the gasoline tax or enhancing the ability for the people who are under the economic level to have a better life. I mean, the economy is not doing very well. The results this last week indicated that year on year, the economy is slipping. People aren't spending money as robustly as they once were. So they want to bring a little bit more relief to the people in anticipation of the next election. And the next election could be one of two things. It could be Mr. Ishiba doesn't do very well. We move into the new diet session and we pass the budget. We get through maybe April 1st, and then things begin to get a little bit funny. The other opportunity is that there's an upper house election at the end of the summer, and a lot of people are jockeying for that position. So it could be that the Democratic Party for the People is just biding its time to increase and enhance its position once more, and go not just for the consolation prize of being attached to the LDP and Komeito in order to move policy along, but actually to take a more firm leadership role. We will know most of this tomorrow as the results come out for the prime minister. So what's going to happen over the next couple of days is tomorrow they will come together. Both houses of the Diet will meet. They will select a prime minister one way or the other. It's going to be easier for me to report on that to you next week. But the two houses will come together. They'll select the prime minister, and then that will be the business for tomorrow. Over the next 3 days, this is a special diet session, by the way, they will talk about perhaps some budgets, potential budgets, or a supplemental budget. There's not much that they can do because by Thursday night, the prime minister will leave for Peru. He's got 2 days of meetings with ASEAN. Then on Monday, a week from tomorrow, there's the G20 that's in Brazil. So he will be gone. The thinking is that perhaps after Brazil, he will travel to Washington, D.C. to meet with President-elect Trump. That is not yet firmly established, but I think it would probably happen, and the logistics make it somewhat appealing. When he comes back to Japan, then they will have another extraordinary session of the Diet, and that will probably go a couple of weeks. We'll be almost into December, and there's not a whole lot that they can do, but I think what the administration needs to do is put together a supplemental budget so that they have money for reducing the amount of taxes on gasoline, to push money into the economy so that those individuals that are living at or around the poverty level have a little bit more relief, and that somehow they can kickstart the economy so that people say, well, I'm very glad that Mr. Ishiba is the prime minister. And even though he is at a 34% approval rating, he lost 12 points, actually, between the time he became prime minister. He closed down the House. There was an election in that very brief period of time, 10-day period of time for the lower house election. He fell 12 points in admiration and appreciation for him and his cabinet. So he's fighting from a position of negatives, and he needs to push that up. And one way to do that, an easy way for prime ministers, is to push out a supplemental budget. So that's something that we can look forward to. As I said, and as everybody knows, Donald Trump is now going to be the 47th president of the United States. That process, he is the president-elect until I think January 15th, and that's when they have the ceremony and he takes office, and then his cabinet moves in. So he's right now naming specific members to his cabinet posts, and they will take office as soon as he becomes president of the United States. William Haggerty, former ambassador to Japan, a great ambassador to Japan, in fact, he was appointed by Mr. Trump in the first Trump administration. It took a long time for the ambassadors to get approved by Congress. And Mr. Haggerty didn't take office until almost a year and a half, 2 years into the Trump presidency. And then there was a little bit of a brouhaha going on there with him, and he resigned. He went back to the United States. He ran for Senate and won a Senate seat, and now he is a U.S. Senator. And he is being looked at as a potential Secretary of State in the new administration. Him or Mr. Rubio from Florida is also being considered senator as a Secretary of State. So a lot of decisions will go there. If it's William Haggerty, that I think reflects very, very nicely on Japan. There will be a lot more decisions and a lot more movement going on there, but it's something to keenly keep an eye on, because these decisions have a big impact on Japan. There's the thought that Mr. Trump will impose tariffs on its trading partners, and Japan, being a trade nation and very close to the United States, would suffer as a consequence of that. Let me see. Komeito, as I told you, their long-term president, Mr. Yamaguchi, resigned at their convention just before the election, or just after the election of the LDP president, where they ended up selecting Mr. Ishiba. This is before the lower house was closed down. He resigned in their convention, and a new person, Mr. Ishii, came in as their new leader after 15 years with Mr. Yamaguchi. They had an election, and Mr. Ishii unfortunately didn't win his seat. So now he's out as the Komeito leader, and they put in yesterday a new leader who will take the party forward. And so there's a lot going on within Komeito and their relationship with the LDP. Komeito didn't come through, as it almost always does, with the number of votes to supplement the LDP. So there's a lot of soul searching that's going on, not just in the United States, but also here in Japan as well, and something that we can all look forward to. It's going to have a big impact. So Tetsuo Sato from Hiroshima, 72 years old, will take over that position starting from yesterday. The Constitutional Democratic Party, as I mentioned in the opening, now holds the very powerful Budget Committee seat. It's not been since 1994 since an opposition candidate, an opposition party, held that position. So it's not just that they went from 98 seats to 149 seats that gives them that ability to insist on the Budget Committee. It doesn't include a cabinet position, but it does include this very powerful position that I think the Constitutional Democratic Party will milk, and we will see a lot of results as a consequence of that. Hirofumi Yu is the appointed person from the Constitutional Democratic Party. Of the 17 standing committees in the lower house, the LDP got 8 of those. The Constitutional Democratic Party got 6. Nippon Ishin-no-kai got 1. The Democratic Party for the People got 1. Komeito got 1. So of the 17, there's a distribution based on what the election results told us. And so that's how those committee positions go. The cabinet, there are 2 positions that were lost because the members lost out. Those were filled this last week by candidates from the LDP. I had thought that there might be at least one cabinet position that was offered to the Democratic Party for the People, but I think maybe because Mr. Tamaki was being so reticent about joining a coalition, and instead saying, let's just be friends. And when you're proposing a policy initiative that we like, then we'll support it. And if not, then, I mean, it's not really being in bed with each other. And I think he needs to preserve that independence for the next round that is coming up. You might remember, moving on, you might remember that in July, there was a yen intervention we suspected, because the yen was at 160, 161, 162. And then it fell down very quickly and strengthened rapidly. And it is now several months after that, and the disclosure of what actually happened has finally come out. It was released just the other day. In July 11th and July 12th, the Ministry of Finance propped up the yen by interjecting into the market 3.17 trillion yen on the 11th. That's about almost 21 billion US dollars. The following day, they injected about 70%, 75% of that amount once again, 2.37 billion yen. They injected into the economy, and that brought the yen from being at about 160, which was a 38-year high, down to something a little bit more reasonable. I'm sure everybody remembers how that happened and what happened there. But it was wow, that's a lot of money. Mostly people are going to ask, where did this money come from? Is it foreign exchange? And I think the real answer is it's just the U.S. bonds that the government holds, treasury bonds. They just sold those to prop up the yen. Ishin-no-kai, Mr. Baba, announced on Thursday that he would be taking responsibility for the poor performance of Ishin-no-kai, going from 43 seats in this last election to 38 seats. On December 1st, Ishin-no-kai will have their convention, and he has said that he's not going to run for the leadership, and he and his Secretary General will both resign and take different positions in the party as dictated by the election that will be held then. So I guess the Ishin-no-kai is going to try a different strategy, but they need to actually become a little bit more of a powerful player in the opposition. One of the ideas was that rather than the Democratic Party for the People being a partner with the LDP, should the LDP not do very well, it would be Ishin-no-kai. But since the Democratic Party for the People did so well, they increased their seats by 250%. I mean, what a shocking revelation that was, telling the LDP that the entire population, the LDP is disdained by the voters, and they want to see changes because of the scandal and what's going on there. So this scandal is not over, because once again, the Constitutional Democratic Party member is running the budget committee. So if there are questions that are left unanswered, it will come up in budget committee hearings. You see budget committee hearings on television pretty frequently. It is basically when the prime minister or members of his cabinet are put in the hot seat. They raise their hand to answer. Somebody asks them a question. The person who has asked the question, they have to ask for acknowledgement from the chairman of the budget committee. He'll stand up and give an answer. So it's a very theatrical performance there, but I think you're going to see a lot of theater there. Once again, APEC is in Peru. It's actually starting tomorrow, but the prime minister won't join until Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, probably Friday and Saturday. Then he takes a break on Sunday and travels to Rio de Janeiro to join the G20. There's 2 days in Rio de Janeiro. And then following that, he will return back to Japan. And the thought is, once again, that he will make a visit. I think it's probably a foregone conclusion that he will go to pay respects and to meet with President-elect Donald Trump. We always talk about what's going on geopolitically and regionally, militarily. North Korea fired off a salvo of missiles just hours before the United States started their election for President of the United States. They fired off perhaps 7 short-range ballistic missiles to make sure that the world's attention was not just on the United States, but they're still here too. Don't forget us. On Thursday, the South Korean frigate visited Yokosuka and was boarded by the Minister of Defense, Gen Nakatani. This is the first time for the Minister of Defense to set foot on a South Korean military vessel. So as we see with the Canadians, we reported on this 2 weeks ago that the Coast Guard came to visit Yokosuka. It was the first time for the Canadian Coast Guard to visit Japan. It was actually an icebreaker that visited, but military, or not military, but Coast Guard application for anti-piracy, for illegal fishing, for surveillance, that sort of thing. I don't think that the Coast Guard vessel actually carries guns, but in terms of surveillance and bolstering the efforts of the Japanese self-defense forces, it's coming in and participating there with a mandate to spread a little bit more Canadian influence, not just to Japan, but throughout this region. And now that is actually, it has been revealed that there's more and more to that the Canadians are coming in a little bit stronger, a little bit heavier throughout this week. So the fact that the missiles were launched on Monday. Can you turn your mic off, please, Maya? I can hear you scribbling with your cat. The missiles being launched by North Korea by the Minister of Defense stepping aboard the South Korean military vessel, and the Canadians coming in stronger. It's just not the Canadians, but it's just the most recent news with the Canadians joining this lattice work of like-minded countries to be a bulwark against potential Chinese incursions into forcing Taiwan to succumb to their demands. There's a lot going on there. Let me see. Tomorrow's election, we can get into the Q&A on the logistics of it, but I think everybody knows there's a round 1 and a round 2. It is mathematically possible that the Constitutional Democratic Party could cobble together an alliance so that the prime minister is not elected from the LDP, but is elected from one of the opposition parties. We'll know that a little bit better tomorrow, but more likely than not, there's going to be 2 rounds. The first round, everybody's going to vote for their own leader. It will go into the second round where number 1 and number 2 will vie against each other. That's going to be Mr. Ishiba and Mr. Noda. And then the opposition parties need to make a decision. Are they going to vote for Mr. Ishiba or Mr. Noda, or are they just going to continue to vote for their own party president? That means that Ishin-no-kai would vote for Mr. Baba, who is still currently their leader, and the Democratic Party members would vote for Mr. Tamaki. If they do that, that means that their votes are invalid because they didn't vote for a valid candidate. The 2 valid candidates in the second round are going to be Mr. Ishiba and Mr. Noda. And it could be that Mr. Noda, in that kind of sanitized election of the upper house and the lower house, that the LDP doesn't do as well as the Constitutional Democratic Party. And as a consequence of that, the Constitutional Democratic Party candidate becomes prime minister. It's a very far stretch to accommodate that thinking without the Democratic Party for the People. And if the Democratic Party for the People is going to do that and to throw their 48 seats into that election, there's probably got to be a bigger tit for the tat there, meaning that Mr. Tamaki is going to take a more serious leadership role. And obviously, with the new prime minister in that situation, there would be a new cabinet formed. He would, kick out the existing cabinet and form a new government. There's so little time left. The prime minister is going to be here tomorrow for the rest of this week until Thursday. And then he's going to be gone. and then there's going to be another extraordinary diet session that can't last, logistically, it can't last more than 3 weeks. So who's going to be prime minister, who's going to be on first base and second base and calling the shots is yet to be seen, but it's all very much in flux. Let me see. There are a couple of decisions that have been made. Justice Minister and the Agriculture Minister lost their seats in this last election. So Mr. Ishiba put in Keisuke Suzuki as Justice Minister. And let me see. For Agriculture, he put in Taku Eto. Interestingly enough, Seiji Kihara, a very close confidant for former Prime Minister Kishida, replaces Shinjiro Koizumi, who was the elections strategy chief within the LDP. He apparently has taken responsibility and resigned from that position. And now Mr. Kishida was able to put his one of his top lieutenants, Mr. Kihara, into that very important role within the LDP. Conversely, we didn't hear anything from Mr. Moriyama or Mr. Ishiba taking responsibility for the LDP performance and resigning, but Mr. Shinjiro Koizumi did resign his seat, and that has been taken up very quickly by Mr. Kihara. So there's a lot going on there, and I think it's very important to keep an eye on that. And let me see, the president of the upper house, even though the election wasn't for the upper house, it was for the lower house, but they've changed the president of the upper house. This is Masakazu Sekiguchi, is now the president of the upper house, probably in preparation for their election later next year. And the individual who vacated that is now taking over the lower house, the upper house caucus, formerly held by Mr. Sekiguchi, and that vacancy is now being held by Keizo Takemi from the upper house. He was just immediately past Minister of Health and Welfare, a very popular upper house politician, and he's got long legs on him as well. That's about it for what's going on in Japanese politics just this last week. I'm sure there's more going on that you want to talk about. I'd like to get to that in the Q&A portion, turn it over to Maya, and see what's going on with all of you. I really look forward to your input and your questions. And if I can't answer them, I'll try and be as forthcoming as possible and let you know that I don't know the answer. But also, since our audience is so broad, there are people that know a whole lot more about some of these issues than either Maya or I or a lot of other people in the audience know. So please, continue to, feed the channel with your information as well. Maya?
Thank you, Timothy. Well, that was a lot of detail actually, and we have quite a few questions already. So before that, though, I would like to give a word of thanks to our other sponsor, Houze Inc. So if you want to work in the fields of custom home design, construction, and renovation, plus commercial building construction, do not hesitate. Well, contact Houze Inc. and get in touch with Hana Urushizawa Howell on LinkedIn. You'll find the contact details, her contact details in the description of the video on YouTube, and also you can very easily reach out to her on LinkedIn. So that is Houze Inc. and Hana Urushizawa Howell. So thank you very much, Timothy. I will start with the questions on LinkedIn, because we've got, once again, the very first questions, 4 of them actually, coming even before the beginning of this live stream, and the questions are from Byron Johnston. Just let me get there now. Okay, no, not here. Oh, okay, here we go. So you ready for that?
Sure.
Yes. Okay, first, some in the LDP leadership appear to consider the Democratic Party for the People's demands as unaffordable.
Yeah.
Question number one. If they cannot agree and the DPFP and Ishin vote against the LDP minority government's 2025 budget, what is the process in Japan to create a new government if if Prime Minister Ishiba resigns?
Okay, so they had a meeting of the LDP. About almost 200 people in the LDP met with the prime minister, I think on Wednesday. It might have been Thursday, but it was a very difficult day for the prime minister. And there were plenty of people that said, you should resign. Look at what you did. You don't deserve to be prime minister, even though we're going to vote for a candidate on Monday. So a little bit of preparation for what was going to be happening. But I think the decision was made that Mr. Ishiba would remain as prime minister until they pass the budget for 2025. And that budget must be passed on April 1st, as everybody knows. So all of the stuff that's happening from not so much right now, but I think we really get into the brass tacks in January. In January, there is a constitutionally mandated diet session that goes for 150 days. And the vast majority of that effort for that mandated diet session is to pass the budget. So I think the thinking right now is keep Mr. Ishiba as the prime minister until we pass that budget, and then for him to resign or something, and let's put in another prime minister. They can do that without there being a whole lot of confusion caused as a consequence of that. So it looks like the LDP has said, look, even Miss Takaichi, she didn't join this meeting where everybody wanted to beat up the president. She didn't even join it. But she did send a message to her LDP members saying that, we need to stick with him. If we have a fractured LDP, we're going to get killed by the Constitutional Democratic Party. We need to be a unified party. I'm not going to incite dissension within the ranks. Let's come together. So I think that voice won over, not just hers, but other people's voices as well. So there's not much time between now and the ordinary diet session. I think the only thing that the diet can do right now is elect their prime minister, pass a supplemental budget, and then close it down. And then we go into the New Year's vacation, and then the diet would start sometime in mid-January for a 150-day session. I hope that answers Byron's questions. He always has good ones.
He does, and I continue with his questions. Question number 2. Does the emperor have any role in the change of government when there is no new election?
So the emperor is the Japanese head of state. The Japanese head of state is not the prime minister, it's the emperor. When emissaries from abroad are sent to Japan, they're not ambassadors, they're only emissaries until they meet with and are authorized by a formal briefing or a formal meeting with the emperor. So I think we've talked about this before. Caroline Kennedy voted for the horse-drawn carriage rather than the motorcade. The horse-drawn carriage is all organized and supplemented by the imperial household. If it's a motorcade or if it's a bus and you've got a lot of people that want to go to this ceremony, there are 3 ways that you can do it. So the emperor receives ambassadors. The emperor opens and closes the diet, but otherwise, in terms of policy or politics, constitutionally, he doesn't have any role there. But also, the imperial household is very reluctant to be very much into Japanese politics. They've actually pushed themselves out because whenever the emperor says anything, I like to drink Coca-Cola, or Coca-Cola that would cause a huge turmoil. So any public statements that he makes carries huge implications. So they're very quiet. You never see them in the press, and they are very reluctant to participate in the political arena. Although as head of state, he is required to open and close the diet. So I think Byron's question is there any other role other than opening or closing the diet? If the diet isn't closed down, for example, if the LDP decides that they're going to have a new president of the LDP, that's a private matter. That's a party matter. It doesn't involve the parliament proper. If there's going to be a new prime minister, that does require the parliament to take action, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the Diet is closed down. But that being said, the prime minister does need to be authorized and accepted by the emperor in a formal ceremony.
Right, but I also think that Byron's question is a little bit different, because he's asking in a case there is no new election. So, what happens? Can the emperor actually have a say in forming a new government when?
No,
No.
no,
Oh,
no. Um, Maybe at a social level, he could say something, or his eyebrow could be lifted up or something.
mhm.
He could make an indication there, which would carry great impact. But I don't think he would do that, and
Right.
he's not really allowed to under the Constitution.
Okay. And question number three, if it is not the emperor, given the Japanese constitution, then who will ask someone else to form the government?
Okay, so that means that the government is somewhat at a standstill. So there are 2 or 3 ways that that can happen. The first one is that I think, kind of like the situation that we're going into, the Constitutional Democratic Party holds the budget chairmanship, and that can control and manipulate a lot of different things. But maybe Komeito, the LDP, and this smattering of the Democratic Party for the People hold some control. But there could be an issue that comes up where all of a sudden the battle lines are drawn. It is less 50-50, the LDP, Komeito, and whoever else, maybe the Constitutional Democratic Party or the Democratic Party for the People, decide to vote against the LDP. Now you have a kind of a breach of confidence, and anybody could, at that point in time, say, the LDP is taking us down the wrong path. We don't like the way that the government is going. The minister of one of the cabinet posts, he was involved in a scandal. So there's this huge thing, and we want to have a vote, and we want to have a vote of no confidence. That's the first way to do it. That among a majority of the members of the upper house or the lower house, there's a vote of no confidence that passes. The second way is that the prime minister could say, you guys, I hate dealing with you guys. We've been working really hard, and you guys are messing things up. So I'm going to close down the house. We're going to have an election and let the public vote, and they will decide. So that's kind of what we did this last election. The prime minister decided, look, it's time for the public to tell us what they feel about the scandal, about closing down all of the factions. Let's live by the vote of the party, or by the vote of the people, the nation of Japan, and live by their decisions. That's what just happened. And although the question hasn't been asked, I think the reason for that, the reason why Mr. Moriyama decided to do that sooner rather than later, was the perception that they're going to get their ass kicked anyway. The longer they wait, the worse it's going to be. So do it quickly. Don't let the opposition parties have an ability or the timing to form a strategy or to collaboratively work together. The end result was they got their ass kicked anyway. But the counter argument to that is, but they didn't, they weren't completely defeated.
Mhm.
And the thought is that they're going to be really killed if they wait a month or 2 months or 3 months. And Mr. Ishiba has his cabinet, and they passed that opportunity, and now we're in January, and it would just be a bloodbath. That's the normal thinking, I believe.
Right. Well, thanks for that. And question number 4 from Byron is, Timothy, what is your view on the probability of a joint upper house and lower house
Yeah.
election in the summer of 2025?
It's a little bit too early to say, but I don't get a vote in that. All I can say is it a good idea? Does it make sense? We're not going to know until then. It is rare for a double election. It's happened in I've worked on election campaigns during a double election. In fact, that's when the person who hired me out of Japanese law school, he changed from the upper house to the lower house during a double election phase. This is maybe I forget, 20 or 30 years ago. But the LDP did tremendously well as a consequence of that. I think the idea for doing a double election depends on, it's probably the opposition party saying, look, since we had the lower house election in October 5 or 6 months ago, we have been able to make certain agreements about these multi-seat districts, and I'm going to take one seat and you're going to take the other. We're not going to fight that much. And let's eclipse what the LDP and Komeito have been able to do. So with Komeito coming down, the people voting for Komeito, the average age is getting older and older. They're dying off. Not new blood is not coming into Komeito. Maybe that's a good strategy. Alternatively, the LDP could say, we've done such a great job. We've made a supplemental budget, and the Democratic Party for the People, it turns out that we have more in common than stuff to fight about. And so we've come together to have this three-party alliance. It's Komeito, it's the LDP, it's the Democratic Party for the People. And we've decided to make Mr. Tamaki, Minister of Finance, and he's really happy about that. So it's time for us to have a dual election where the members of the upper house and that's already set in stone. There will be an election for the upper house, and then the decision is either the prime ministers or the membership at large to decide. Let's close down the house and have an election too. So that's probably a decision that's made by the LDP, I would say.
Well, thank you for this, the answers. And now I'm moving to Clubhouse where we have questions from Cam. And
Cam,
yes, thank you very much. I
thanks for
don't
joining
know.
us. I guess you're a little bit busy.
Quite a lot, probably. Yes. Okay. So I start with the first question. The obvious question from me today is, what does Trump victory mean for Japan?
Everybody wants to know that answer, and we don't know what the Trump policy is going to be with regard to tariffs, for example. Japan is a country that lives and dies by trade, and tariffs make a huge difference. And the economy is not doing so well, and so any kind of bump or heat from the United States on selling products into the United States is going to have a negative effect. Similarly, we're in year 3. We're moving into year 3 of the 5-year plan to enhance Japan's defense capabilities, probably offensive capabilities as well. And now, rather than Mr. Kishida, we have Mr. Ishiba, who is saying, this status of forces agreement, I think I'd like to change this and this and this, where Mr. Kishida never said anything like that. So it could be a little bit of contention there. They're still on the 5-year plan. The amount of money they have earmarked for every year is getting more and more expensive because of the yen-dollar ratio, the value there. And also some of these projects that they're buying for offensive or defensive capabilities that are coming from the United States, other places in the world too, but predominantly from the United States, the payments for those kick in a little bit later. And if Mr. Tamaki has his way, I think it was Byron who also said Mr. Tamaki's demands are seen as a little bit extravagant and expensive. And it's true. I mean, there are trillions of yen that will not be going into the tax offices to run the economy if Mr. Tamaki's demands are met. And one of the requirements or the promises from Japan to the United States is this 5-year plan, and we're going to stick to it. So it is possible that, the acrimony between incoming President Trump and Mr. Ishiba or whoever replaces Mr. Ishiba is not as sweet as it was under Mr. Abe. Mr. Abe and Mr. Trump, by the way, had a very warm relationship for a lot of strange and different reasons, but they genuinely liked each other. I don't know how that's going to go with Mr. Ishiba. It's kind of hard to envision, but before Trump met Mr. Abe, you would have thought the same thing. I mean, what a quirky guy Mr. Abe is compared to Mr. Trump, but it turns out that they hit it off really well. I mean, surprisingly well. So it remains to be seen. What I'm really interested in is who's going to be selected as ambassador to Japan. That's going to be a big deal for us, and hopefully we can get the State Department back on track and get some, some real affinity between Washington, D.C. and Tokyo. Tokyo's been off the radar for a long time, so looking forward to a little bit more energy there.
Right. And then you mentioned tariffs, Timothy, and the next question from Cam is actually based on the importance of tariffs and the potential to increase them. So, what effect might the Trump presidency have on the yen rate?
Oh, so already there was a deleterious effect on the dollar yen rate. As soon as Mr. Trump was elected president or president of the United States, the yen took a 1.2% hit. It went down. So it went from like 153 to 155 or 156. So it got weaker as a consequence of Mr. Trump being elected president. Conversely, the Nikkei average increased by 2.6%. So there's this relationship between the yen and stocks, and what happened with the election. Stocks actually improved, telling you that at least the business culture evaluates Mr. Trump as president of the United States highly, but the balance of payments and the value of the yen compared to the dollar is a little bit weaker. So there are things that we can do about that, but I think if the question is what's the Trump presidency impact on the yen rate, what we've seen so far is that it's a negative impact, but it's not. We don't know, but it could be that as the yen creeps up to $160 to the yen, and the Bank of Japan and the Ministry of Finance becomes a little bit nervous, there could be yet another intervention. These interventions, you saw how much money they injected into the system. That was by selling U.S. Treasury bonds. I think the Japanese government, I don't know what the number is, but they hold a tremendous amount of U.S. Treasury bonds. So they just trade those in. It is real money, but it's almost not like real money. It's just this infiltration of capital to keep the yen at a more stable position. When the yen is weak, businesses suffer. When it's strong, the economy begins to take off. So it's a complicated relationship.
Well, thank you for that. And one more question from Cam. Well, he says, what key priorities will Japan aim to discuss with the incoming administration? Cam, I believe you mean the American administration. So, because that's the topic at the moment. But of course, we are probably going to have a slightly new administration here in Japan. So,
hard to say.
Yeah. Hard to say, yeah.
Gen Nakatani is a figure we all know. He's very astute. He's a great politician, Minister of Defense, lots of experience there. So his relationship with the new Minister of Defense in the United States, it's not Minister of Defense. What is he called? The Secretary of Defense, right?
Defense Department, maybe.
Right. But it's a whole new ball of wax. We don't even know who the cabinet is yet and what the negotiating points are going to be. But I'm very confident that Mr. Trump knows what he's doing. He's done this before. He's not going to get bamboozled like he was in the first administration. He's not going to hire a bunch of people who end up in a position of power and then end up, being less than loyal and doing what the commander-in-chief said. I don't think you're going to have too much of that. There will be a lot of turmoil with the party that's not in power, but such a resounding win by the Trump administration. I think policy will move very quickly forward. You can already tell with some of the pronouncements that are coming out of the Mar-a-Lago and a lot of the things that have your fingerprints all over it, Cam. So we're really honored that you're here on this show with us. You're doing such a great job. So thank you for your service.
Yeah, very much so. And one question from me before we move back to LinkedIn, where we have questions from Hiroko and Joshua as well. So we know that, and you mentioned earlier, Timothy, that some of the commission chair seats, they have been redistributed. So it also means that probably we'll see some changes in policy making here. So do you expect that there will be a lot of deviation from what happened under the Abe administration and maybe also the Kishida
Yeah,
administration? Yeah.
yeah, I think that's unavoidable and probably something that is unavoidable. And the reason for that is, although the cabinet heads might change and they might be from a different party than what Mr. Abe had or what Mr. Kishida had or maybe even Mr. Suga, it's Mr. Ishiba's turn and he selects these people and hopefully they follow the dictates and the mandate and the manifesto of the LDP and the instructions they get from the prime minister. But they don't call all the shots. And as we all know, the career bureaucrats basically run these ships, these various ministries. So the commander, the cabinet minister, does have some say in guiding it. But you know, these ministers are so busy. A car picks them up. They go from meeting to meeting to meeting. They make pronouncements. They sign documents. They read speeches that are written for them. So I think the ship of state is really pretty much guided by the bureaucrats, and there's a little bit of fine tuning at the upper levels. But I don't think there's going to be a huge change there, except for the fact that now the LDP has to share power with the Constitutional Democratic Party and with the Democratic Party for the People, probably a little bit with Ishin as well. So policy issues that come up are going to be challenged. It used to be that the LDP would say, this is the policy, this is how we're going to do it, and if you don't like it, hey, go take a hike, because we have more votes in the committee, and the committee has decided it's going to be like this, and now it's time for the committee to push this up for the bill to be voted upon in the parliament, and now it becomes law. So that whole machinery is kind of going in that direction. So I think the outlook is just turmoil and a lot of just really staggered movement forward. I think it's going to be a very difficult next couple of months until the budget passes in April.
Right. Well, thank you for that. I think that we'll continue talking about this on the way forward as well. Now, going back to LinkedIn with a question from Hiroko-san. She says, what do you think will happen to Nippon Steel's acquisition of US Steel and the whole deal there?
So, Hiroko-san, you're always following Nippon Steel. It is a very big issue. Actually, Cam might have a little bit more insight on this. I think what they're trying to do is, while Mr. Biden is still president of the United States, is to push this thing through. So having this deal go through does generate some challenges and some negative effects, but for some people, it is very beneficial. So one thought is, before the president finishes, he closes that, and some of the benefits are distributed to people he wants them distributed to, and the negative impact is distributed to people he doesn't like. He does have that ability. That's how politics works, and it's not too unusual. The president-elect and Mr. Biden will meet, I think, this week on Wednesday. They'll have a discussion about this and other issues. There's also another shocking revelation that just came out about the Iranian assassination team that was sent to execute Mr. Trump before the election. So that news came out just 2 days ago. So it's very worrying what's going on there. I wish Cam was on the line to give us a little bit more insight into what's going on there, but I hope that responds somewhat to the question.
Yeah, so Hiroko-san actually, she has other follow-up comment and questions. Just let me get there because it's too many windows open on my computer screen. I apologize for this. Okay, here we go. According to some reports, due to the political situation in the United States, Nippon Steel's plan to acquire the major American steel company is taking an unusual course. While the final outcome remains uncertain, if the acquisition does not go through, it is certain to deal a significant blow to the management of both Nippon Steel and US Steel. Is it possible for the president of the US to intervene in this
Yes.
kind of business and deal transaction? Both companies, including the US Steel's Union, are happy with the deal and it would boost their business.
Oh, definitely. The deal has tremendous political implications. And although they've already done kind of an analysis of why we've ended up in this mess and how come that it wasn't able to sail through, and one of the uh, kind of defining issues there was the lobbyists that were chosen by Nippon Steel to move this process through the political machinery. They just didn't do a very good job. It could have been done a lot better, more smoothly, if there had been a smoother lobbying effort and included more of the political machinery. So, in the end result is that yes, the president holds a great sway over a position like that because he can actually kill the deal on just on terms of national security. He could say this is a national security interest. We don't want a foreign company owning one of our primary industries, the U.S. steel. Are you kidding me? And the argument from the Japanese is we're going to make U.S. steel more effective, more efficient, better steel, cheaper. We're going to help the U.S. economy grow by hiring more people, and so that's the argument. But it
Right.
is, yeah, the fat lady hasn't sung yet, and it's still in play. It's not a dead deal yet.
No, it isn't. Yes. Okay, so thanks for that. And also another question on LinkedIn. This time it is from Joshua. Joshua, thank you very much for watching and for the question as well. So Joshua writes, this past week, PM Ishiba showed his willingness to resume talks on the active cyber defense bill after a pause of several months. Is there any reason for this timing, particularly given the PM's politically precarious situation? What is your take on this, Timothy?
There are a couple of things that are going on there. I think part of it is that Japan has an acknowledgement that it wants to join Five Eyes. Nobody wants Japan to join Five Eyes. You guys don't have your act together. Every time we give you some secret information, some soldier leaves it in his backpack on the train, or something like that. A colonel was fired maybe 2 months ago. I think we reported on it here for leaking confidential information in a kind of a haphazard way. It wasn't on purpose. It wasn't nefarious. It's just it leaked. But I think Japan has acknowledged that it really needs to beef it up. You might have noticed also, Josh, that Vietnam has implemented data protections that are very, very severe, preventing foreign carriers from moving into Vietnam for cybersecurity concerns. So there's a lot going on in that area, and I think it's well acknowledged that Japan is well behind the curve and needs to bolster that up. There are a couple of problems there, and Josh, since you're closer to it, I'd love to hear your input on it too. But just getting the right people there, the people who have the experience and have the mindset to handle cybersecurity issues. I mean, even the ministry, the digital ministry. I think there are 500 plus employees in the digital ministry. When they first launched this, they had to go into regular companies and kind of headhunt or second people who were doing that because they just couldn't find the people. They gave them a job as a civil servant while they were working at Cisco or Apple or Microsoft, to fill these roles for a provisional period until they could train or find other people. But I think they're still sucking wind. Just having the number and the quality of those people. It's not just in the private sector or in the government. It's the Ministry of Defense as well. It's a very, very big issue, but it's one that requires a little bit more depth and thought. And I think I don't possess that, Josh, but I know you do. So I'd look forward to more of your input on that.
Right. Well, thank you very much for the answer, Joshua. I do hope it answers your question as well. And okay, we have also a comment or probably a question from Kai. Good morning, Kai. Thank you for tuning in. So he says, I would have thought that with Mr. Trump's election victory, Japan would have more room to strengthen the yen, given his suspicions of currency manipulations by foreign countries to undermine the U.S. economy competitiveness.
That's a really keen observation, but it's only been a week. So who knows? Yes, but there is an international movement going on to weaken the dollar as the currency of the world, the oil currency. The BRICS nations are coming on very strong. They just had a big convention about maybe 3 weeks ago. China and Russia played a very important role in the BRICS convention, and this effort to dispel the reliance on the U.S. dollar. Should that happen, the United States is in a very difficult and precarious position on a global run, with the dollar being the world currency for most extensive purposes. So a lot more to be seen on that.
Right. Okay. Thanks a lot
Thanks,
for that.
Kai.
Well, thank you. And Yuka, thank you for tuning in. Yes, I was not aware. No, I knew that there was something like that, but didn't really remember that the time saving, what's that time?
Daylight savings time.
Daylight saving time now. Yes, the US has moved, their time. So there is a difference. And for those of you who came in late, well, you still can catch up with this podcast, the live stream after we are finished, because it will remain there on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook as well. It will be in Clubhouse as well. So let's see. Okay, we've got a couple of more comments in Clubhouse from Cam.
Also, sorry, one
Yes?
more issue there. We're talking about daylight savings time, where the United States advances the clock 1 hour. I'm not sure what day of the week that they do that, but I think that might have even already happened. But the other thing going on in the United States, if you're doing business with the United States, is that tomorrow is a national holiday. It is Veterans Day, so a lot of banks and schools are off tomorrow.
Right. Okay. So thank you for that detail, Timothy. And let me just read out the comments on the US Steel and Japan Steel deal. The comments by Cam. He says, publicly, Pompeo is currently working on behalf of a foreign company to get US Steel acquired by the Japanese. Also, the reason why Trump announced he won't be hiring Pompeo under the next administration. Or maybe this is the reason. Okay, well, this is getting interesting there, and it looks like there will be a lot of developments, which will continue to follow, of course, and I'm sure that Hiroko-san, you're going to. Yes, there is conflict of interest. Thank you, Cam. Thank you for that. Right. Okay, Timothy, it looks like we have gone through all the comments, questions, observations, and also, details here. Thanks a lot for today's session as well. I know that you are on your boat now. I can see that, and I appreciate your time for doing this. And to everybody who stayed with us, thanks a lot for being with us this morning again on November the 10th. And we'll be here once again next Sunday at 8:20. Okay, so for everybody watching us or listening to us from the United States, now the time is different for you, thanks to the daylight saving time there. Okay, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, please share them with us even during the week so that we can talk about them or address them next week on Sunday morning. And of course, if you are on any of the platforms now, let us know that you have been there. Give us a like, hit subscribe, or just, let us leave a comment. That's all. Timothy.
Thank you very much, Maya. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I look forward to talking with you next week. I'll try and do a little bit deeper research on Joshua's question so that we can give that a little bit more thought. And also, Cam, thank you very much for participating. We look forward to your input, and thanks for being a part of the audience. You're playing a very central role, and congratulations on your election.
Congratulations on that. And well, one more thing before we say goodbye. Thanks a lot to our sponsors, Kanagawa Chuo Jutaku or Kanchu, where you can contact James at kanachu.com for any projects in buying and selling real estate in Tokyo and Yokohama, property management, investment property. And also you can talk with Hana Howell, who represents Houze Inc. for any projects in custom home design and construction, renovations, and commercial building construction. Thanks a lot to both of you, Hannah and James. It's a pleasure to help you get more visibility here and with our audiences. That's all for today. Have a great Sunday. See you next Sunday again.